Danish and German are both Germanic languages. But what does that actually mean in real life? How much do they have in common, and how easy is it to learn one if you already know the other? This video will give you an overview over Danish and German, and if you're interested in these two languages, watch it until the end. Welcome to Mixed Languages. My name is Michael, or Mick. Today I will be talking about my two native languages. First, I will introduce myself in both languages, so that you can compare them and already hear how they sound. Okay, jeg hedder Michael, jeg kommer fra Danmark, jeg er født i Danmark, på Fyn, hvor jeg boede de første 8 år af mit liv. Dann bin ich nach Deutschland gezogen, wo ich 11 Jahre lang in Wiesbaden gelebt habe. Meine Mutter ist Deutsche. Nach dem Abitur bin ich dann zurück nach Dänemark gezogen, nach Kopenhagen. I København tog jeg en kandidatuddannelse som tolk og translatør i sprogene tysk og dansk på Copenhagen Business School. Af de forskellige steder, hvor jeg har boet indtil videre, er København det sted, hvor jeg har boet flest år. Zurzeit wohne ich in Brasilien. Great, let's look at the languages. I will try to be as concise as possible, but also as thorough as possible. We will start by looking at vocabulary, then we'll move on to grammar, and then in the end to pronunciation. I will also sometimes compare these two languages with the English language, especially in the grammar part. So vocabulary. Vocabulary, right, they're both Germanic languages, and around 30 to maybe 40% of the words in the languages are from the same root, so they're very similar. Let me give you some examples here of words that are very similar in these two languages. First the German and then the Danish word. Arbeiten, arbejde. Behandeln, behandle. Bild, billede. Farbe, farve. But we would actually in modern Danish say farve. Farbe, farve. Fußgænger, fodgænger. Himmel, himmel. Lastwagen, lastvogn. Plötzlich, pludselig. Spannend, spændende. Styk, stykke. While we have a lot of words that are very similar or almost the same, we also have some false friends, false cognates. I'll give you just one here, and maybe in the future I'll make another video about false cognates between Danish and German, maybe also Danish and English if you're interested. So we have the word gift in German, which in Danish is gift, which means poison. But in Danish we also have the word gift, which can mean to be married, right? So that's kind of funny for many people who learn Danish, that the word for poison and married is the same word. So while there are some false friends, but also many words that are very similar, there are also words, especially in the basic language, that are totally different. For example, if we look at the personal pronouns he and she, which in German is er und sie, in Danish that's gonna be han or hun. Totally different, right? So in German you have the word hahn, huhn, that looks similar, but they mean a male chicken, rooster, and chicken, huhn, right? And we could also look at han which means he is. So you see the word in this case, it looks like the German which means he, so but it's totally different, right? The in Danish is the verb, is, and in German it corresponds to the han, right? Han which in German would be ist. But the han and the hun, right, that's interesting because for people who have difficulties remembering han and hun, keeping them apart, which happens for many Danish learners, in German you can easily remember because han is the male animal and hun is the female one. And now let's move on to grammar. We'll start with looking at verbs. Verbs in German function in a different way than in Danish because in German there is something called conjugation. So let's look at the present tense for eat. I eat, you eat, and so on. In English, you see, it's all the same, right? We also don't really have conjugation in English. We have conjugation in the verb to be. I am, you are, he is. Different forms. And we also have the third form singular here in this case. I eat, you eat, he, she, it eats. There's an S, right? In German, they all have different forms. That makes it a bit difficult, especially if your native language doesn't have conjugation, like Danish doesn't have, right? So in German it's ich esse, du isst, sie es isst, wir essen, ihr esst, sie essen. Where in Danish it's all the same. Jeg spiser, du spiser, han, hun, den, det spiser, vi spiser, I spiser, de spiser. This is actually interesting because Danish people, native Danish people, when they learn German, they will often not be able to get the conjugations right because it's just something they're not used to using, right? So if something you don't have in your own language, it's difficult to get it right. So even Danes who speak English, some Danes would not be able to differentiate between are and is in English. Moving on, let's go to verb tenses. In German, Danish, and English, we have 3 different forms for the present, past, and the present perfect. So present tense, let's look at the word to be here. Ist, han he is. The past, simple past would be var, han var, he was. Present perfect, ist gewesen, han har været, he has been. Okay, so all of these 3 languages have 3 different forms here. But in German and Danish, it's a bit more tricky in the present perfect because we can form the present perfect either with the verb to be, which is happening in German in this case. Ist gewesen. Ist is a form of to be. And with the verb to have, like in Danish here, han har været. Har is a form of to have. Hey. But there are special cases when you use one or the other. So that's something you have to learn. That can be difficult for English speakers because in English it's all going to be with have. He has been, I have eaten, I have done, you have done, and so on. In the future tense, none of these languages has a distinct form here. Some other languages like Romance languages have distinct forms often, but here German uses an auxiliary verb, wird in this case, in our example, a form of werden. Wird sein. Sein is the infinitive form. In Danish we have 4 different forms that we generally use to make the future. I will not talk about when to use which here, but I'll just list the 4 ways that we can do this here with the verb to be. Han skal være, han vil være, han kommer til at være, han han bliver. Actually 5 in this case, right? And in English it's all going to be he will be, or maybe he's going to be. So in English we have 2 ways, in German just 1. So German is a lot easier here, but in other cases German is a lot more complex in the grammar. For example, German has the conjunctive, which is in English is called subjunctive. Conjunctive 1 is used especially in written language in German. An example here is, die Medien sagen, sei ein guter Mensch. So we have the word sei, which is a special form, it's a special verb form here, different from the other forms, which kind of says here, okay, he might be a bad person, but the media say that he is a good person. So according to the media, right, the sei here refers to it's the media that say this. Where in Danish and English we just use the present tense verb form here. Medierne siger, at han et godt menneske, right? English, the media say or says that he is a good person, is just the present form. Then we have the conjunctive 2, which again is a different form in German. Wäre in this case. Wenn die Medien ehrlich wären, würden sie die Dinge anders machen. Right? Wären here. This is kind of a unreal thing, a hypothetical thing. So in these cases we use that in German, this special form, conjunctive 2. In Danish the sentence would be, hvis medierne var ærlige, ville de gøre tingene anderledes. Hvis medierne var ærlige, past tense form. And in English the same. If the media were honest, they would do things differently, which also is the past tense form. Let's move on to nouns. First of all, spelling-wise, in German we have capitalization of all nouns. All nouns are capitalized in German. So you see here, names are capitalized in all 3 languages. Peter in German, Peter Danish, and Peter English, right? But then nouns like Haus, Liebe are capitalized in German, not so in Danish or English. And then there's one thing that is capitalized in English as well, days and months, Monday and March. And in German, right, they are nouns, so they are of course also capitalized. Montag, März, which in Danish is not capitalized. Mandag, Marts. Another interesting thing is grammatical gender. In English, we just have 1 gender in nouns. For example, if we look at here, the politician, if it's a man or if it's a woman, it's the same. The politician and the parliament, that would all be the same. But in German, we have 3 different forms. Der Politiker, die Politikerin, und das Parlament. Right, so you see 3 forms, a masculine, feminine, and a neutral form. Where in Danish, we have 2 forms. Masculine, feminine has been put together Danish used to have, many centuries ago, used to have 3 forms as well, but the 2 masculine and feminine were put together. So we have politikken, even for a female we would still use the same form, and parlamentet, you see the ending here, et, when the other 2 forms was en. Now let's move on to declination. Declination is something we have in all 3 languages, but only in very few cases in Danish and English. In Danish and English we have it in the pronouns, in the personal pronouns. For example, if we look at the word he here, we have in English he, his, him, him. In Danish we have han, hans or sin, ham, ham. Where in German we have a distinction between what we call dative and accusative. So we have sein, ihm, ihn. Let me give you an example. Fragt ihn, ob ihm sein Auto leiht. We have all these 4 words in the sentence. Fragt ihn, ob ihm sein Auto leiht. Where in Danish that would be, han spørger ham, om han vil låne ham sin bil. And in English we also only have 3 different forms, right? So Danish and English are alike here. But in Danish we also have this sin, right? Hans and sin. I also don't want to talk about this here. But we have to distinguish. That's a grammatical distinction. When do we use hans? When do we use sin? It means the same in English, his. But there are cases where we use one or the other. And so that was pronouns. But declination happens in nouns in German, which doesn't happen in English or Danish, right? So let me give you here the German sentences. Wir wählen den Politiker. Wir vertrauen dem Politiker. Es ist die Aufgabe des Politikers, für uns zu arbeiten. Aber der Politiker lügt, stiehlt und macht geheime Vereinbarungen mit großen Unternehmen. Was machen wir? A little story here for you. Right, so we have, if we look at the politician in English, it's all the same form. In Danish as well, all the same form. No, actually, we have the genitive form here. Der politikernes opgave. Right, here we have an S in the end. And in English, we also have, for example, Peter's duty, for example. But in German, we have 4 different forms, right? Den Politiker, des Politikers, der Politiker. And that happens in all nouns. Imagine if you don't speak German as a native language and you have to learn that, to learn to use the right forms in the right cases. That's not easy. And again, for Danish speakers who learn German, it is very, very difficult to learn. Now let's look at articles and adjectives in nouns. Here, Danish is a bit weird. Let's first look at German, where we use nouns together with adjectives. Ein großer Kuchen is a big cake. You see the English translation here. Der große Kuchen is the big cake. Eine große Welle, die große Welle. Ein großes Haus, das große Haus. Große Schuhe, die großen Schuhe. So you see here, you have to use different forms in German of the adjective. Especially in the indefinite form, ein großer Kuchen, eine große Welle, where the adjective is the same in the indefinite form, der große Kuchen, die große Welle, das große Haus, and the plural, okay, it is großen, die großen Schuhe. Danish here also has to distinguish between the different adjective forms. In stor kage, den store kage. In stor bølge, den store bølge, right, masculine and feminine being the same. Et stort hus. Here we have a T in the end of the adjective. Det store hus. And store sko, de store sko. So, right, we have the plural also, the plural indefinite form, store sko, is also a different form with E. And then all of the definite article forms, the big cake, the big wave, and so on, they have the E form, the E in the end of the adjective. And English is super easy. It all is the same adjective form. A big cake, the big cake, a big wave, the big wave, and so on. It's all the same adjective. Super easy. And if we look at the same here without adjective, it is very simple in German and English. So we would have ein Kuchen, der Kuchen. Eine Welle, die Welle. Ein Haus, das Haus. Schuhe, die Schuhe. Right? And in Danish, it would be en kage, kagen. So now suddenly the article is in the end. En bølge, bølgen, definite form, the wave, the cake, the article is in the end. Et hus, huset, the article is in the end, the et in the end, right? Sko, skoene, ne, the article is in the end, the shoes. This happens when we have the definite article with a noun that has no adjective, right? The cake, the wave. Whereas before we had the big cake, it's now the article is in the beginning, den store kage. So that's a bit difficult, for example, for Germans who are learning Danish, because they have to differentiate between these two cases, right? With or without adjective. Now the next thing is the syntax. Syntax, right? The sentence structure in these three languages. We can start with a simple sentence here with one verb. Ist nicht direkt vom Tisch. So here we have the what we call SVA, right? Subject. The subject of the sentence is he. Ist is the verb. And then we have nicht, which is the adverb here. And then we have the rest. In Danish we have the same. Han spiser ikke direkte af bordet. Right? SVA. He eats not. In English we also kind of have the same SVA in many cases. He does not eat directly from the table. Right? So we have he, subject, and then the verb does, and then the adverb not. But for example, if you have only one verb, right? In the above sentence we had does eat, two verbs. But if you have one verb only, eats, he never eats. Now the never kind of comes in between. So English is actually more difficult here. Now it's SAV. If we have a similar sentence but now with two verbs, in German it would be like this. Hat noch nie direkt vom Tisch gegessen. So what happens here? SVA, we still have SVA. Hat noch nie. Right? That's the same as before. SVA. But we have here two verbs, right? So we could call them V1 and V2. Where gegessen is the V2, and that comes in the end after everything. That's what kind of keeps German apart from many languages. We have the one part of the verb in the end of the sentence. Hat noch nie vom Tisch gegessen, right? So the rest is, in this case, vom Tisch, but there could be all kinds of other things in between here. Before the V2 comes in the end, gegessen. And in Danish, the same sentence would be, han har aldrig spist direkte af bordet. So here we have han har aldrig, still the same, S, V1 and A. And then we have the V2 now, spist, and then we have the rest. So what's different here is the placement of the V2 or the placement of the rest, however you want to look at it. And in English, it is the same as in Danish. He has never eaten, and then the rest. In questions, we can look at Danish and English first, because they're the same. Har han nogensinde spist direkte af bordet? Har is the V1. S, han. Nogensinde is the A here, the adverb. Spist is the V2, the second verb. And then the rest. In English is the same. Has he ever eaten directly from the table? Whereas German here has hat jemals direkt vom Tisch gegessen. So we have the same idea. We have the V2 in the end again, after the rest. And then there's something that is the same in Danish and German, but not in English, which is inversion in non-question sentences. For example here, deswegen hat nie direkt vom Tisch gegessen. Right? We have the sentence we had before, and we just put the word deswegen, therefore, in English, in the beginning, and now we have inversion, so we have to put the V1 before the S. The verb comes before the subject. Deswegen hat nie direkt vom Tisch gegessen. In Danish is the same. Therefore har han. So V1 and S. And the rest stays the same as we just had in the previous example. And then we also need to look at subclauses. Subclauses are also special in German. For example, we have Ich glaube, dass nie direkt vom Tisch gegessen hat. Ich glaube. And then we have the subclause, right? It starts here after the conjunction. Subjunction in English, in German is called Konjunktion. Das. And then we have the S, the subject, he. And then we have the A here, nie. And then we have the rest, direkt vom Tisch. And then we have the V2 and the V1 actually. So the V1 now comes in the end of the subclause. Hat, right? Remember that hat was the V1 before. And now it's still the V1, but it comes in the end of the sentence. And in Danish, the subclause also has a special order compared to English. It is a different syntax than in non-subclauses. Jeg tror, at han aldrig har spist direkte af bordet. Right? So here, at han aldrig har. So now we have SAV, SAV1, V2. Whereas in English, it doesn't change the subclause. We don't change the syntax. I think that he has never eaten. It's the same as saying without I think, just saying it as a main clause. He has never eaten. I think that he has never eaten. I have a video about syntax in Danish if you want to check that out. Now let's look at the last topic here, which is phonetics. First of all, we can say that German is a bit easier to learn to pronounce than the other two languages, in that it is more consistent. It is often called a phonetic language. So it is more prone to be pronounced the way it is spelled. Not always, but in many cases it is. Much more than Danish and English. In English, for example, let's just look at these following words to see how crazy it is. They look the same. They have the same kind of vowel combination, but they are totally different here, right? Though, thought, tough, through. 4 different sounds, but it looks almost the same, right? That's crazy. Danish is very similar. Let me just give you some examples here. In this case, da, di, det, which are very important basic words, meaning something like there, and then they, and then it. Da, di, det. That's totally against the normal Danish pronunciation rules, because the second word here, di, is pronounced with an I. That doesn't happen in other cases where this letter, which we call E in Danish, is pronounced I. We would have to have an I in English, or an I in Danish, to say di. And the third word, det, without the T pronounced, that's also totally against the Danish rules. And we have a lot of that in Danish. So here German is the winner in ease of learning. But apart from this phonetic or non-phonetic feature in the languages, let's look at the specific sounds that can be difficult to learn. Let's look at consonants first. In German, we have some sounds that are difficult for Danish speakers. We have the voiced S, for example, Sand. Right, in English it's sand. Sand. In Danish, there is no voiced S. So Danes would say sand. In Danish, it's sand. And Danes would often have difficulties saying this sound correctly. Also when they speak English, right? English has the same sound, right? German, of course, also has the voiced S, the strong S, like in Danish, sand. Then we have the Z, which for Danes is also difficult to say. Zeit in German. And in Danish, we kind of have this sound in TS, for example here, Notiz, tits in the end. But we cannot really, or normal Danes who didn't grow up with German like I did, they have difficulties to say this in the beginning of a word. So they would often say Zeit or something instead of Zeit. And now let's look at some other sounds here that are also difficult in German. Let's look at this sentence. Schau dich doch Schau dich doch Schau is the SCH, the SCH. Sh, English has the same sound. Dich, and then doch. There are 3 different sounds here. Schau dich doch And Danish doesn't have any of these sounds. Danish has only the SJ sound, as for example in sjov. So if a normal Dane is supposed to say this sentence, it would sound something like this. Schau dich doch
Schau dich doch
So it sounds like a kind of a K sound or G sound in this dich and doch, right? And the schau is like an SJ, schau dich doch Then the next consonant, the R from the throat. Both languages have this. English doesn't, so that's tough for English speakers to learn. For example, Reise. Then we have the soft D in Danish, which is difficult sometimes for German speakers to learn. The soft D is, for example, in the word vid versus vil. I have a video on that as well if you want to check that out. Now let's look at vowel sounds. The vowel sounds between Danish and German are almost the same. It's almost the same, so I won't really talk about this here. German also has a lot of different vowel sounds, and they sound very similar in many cases. But one thing that's difficult for German speakers, one thing that Danish has, is the O. Right, we have O. In German there's only O, but in Danish we also have O, and that's often we can kind of hear that a person speaking Danish, that person is German, is a native German when they cannot pronounce the O correctly. Let me just give an example here. Mode. In German you have the same word, Mode. And then we have Måde, which means a way, a certain way to do something. Måde, måde. Last thing here I want to talk about is stød, which is something that Danish has, which German doesn't have, which is kind of, it's called a glottal stop. And let me just give an example here. Han leger med en hund. 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 The second sentence is a bit far-fetched, maybe. It would mean he plays with a she, with a female. It's a very like biological term to use hun in this case, the way I'm using it here. But it's a good way to show the difference between and the importance of pronouncing the stød, which is happening in the hund. Han leger med en hund. And in han leger med en hund, there's no stød. I have a whole series on the stød as well if you're interested in that. Great, that was my video about Danish and German. Before you go, I want to let you know that I have just participated in a video about Danish and German on the YouTube channel called Ecolinguist. It's a fairly popular channel, definitely recommendable for anybody who likes languages. So check out that video. I have the link in the description. And if you have found my channel Mixed Languages via the Ecolinguist video, feel free to subscribe to this channel for content on Danish, German, some Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, and in the future I will also post some videos about language learning in general. Feel free also to let me know in the comments if I forgot something important, some important differences between these two languages, Danish and German. Feel free also to write anything else that you would like to write in the comments. Thanks for your attention. See you around.